I think that Lamar Jackson has heard the noise, has discerned the whispers about whether or not he's doing enough to get back out on the field, because out of the blue yesterday, here's what he tweeted about the knee that he injured back on December 4 against the Denver Broncos. Thank you, everyone, for your support and concerns regarding my injuries. Interesting that it's plural. I want to give you all an update as I am in the recovery process. I've suffered a PCL grade 2 sprain on the borderline of a strain 3. There is still inflammation surrounding my knee, and my knee remains unstable. I'm in good spirits as I continue with treatments on the road to recovery. I wish I could be out there with my guys more than anything, but I can't give 100% of myself to my guys and fans. I'm still hopeful we still have a chance. Again, this is coming as it becomes more and more clear he's not going to play this Sunday, and it's now abundantly clear. It's just a matter of the Ravens officially ruling him out. But John Harbaugh earlier this week talking about how a player can play, not just Lamar, any player, if he's less than 100%, as long as he can protect himself, yada, yada. And again, I'm hearing, and I'm sure you're hearing, there's just kind of frustration bordering on exasperation from the team, from the players, etc., that maybe Lamar isn't giving it his all when maybe he could be. And I think this tweet was a reaction to that. Peter, your thoughts?
Well, Mike, I think it's obviously anytime a player gets hurt, it's almost impossible for people on the outside to know exactly what is going on. And obviously Lamar, I would think, issued this statement because essentially, when he says it's a grade 2 strain bordering on 3, he's trying to let people know that this is not your garden variety PCL strain, where originally it was said that he should be back in 2 to 3 weeks. Now, there's been one noted PCL strain this season. Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys, the tight end, strained his PCL in week 2. He sat in week 3, played ineffectively in week 4 and 5, sat in week 6, and then has played every week since then, and is averaging, I think, 58 snaps a game since then. So basically, he missed 2 games, Dalton Schultz did, and played ineffectively in 2 others, and has been his old self the rest of the way. And I think most people, and this week, Mike, I talked to 2 medical people about PCL sprains because I don't think many people actually know. I really don't know what they are. And it's an injury that does not get better with surgery. It gets better with what I was told by this trainer, aggressive rehab. And you have to strengthen all the areas of the leg, particularly sort of the quad around there to sort of strengthen it. And the other medical person I talked to said a player is going to feel instability, and the player has to have confidence that it's not going to get any worse, because almost always it doesn't get any worse. And look, as I said, it's been 40 days since Lamar Jackson had this injury, and by this time, most people who have PCL sprains are either playing or practicing or whatever. He's not doing either. And as I say, Mike, it's impossible not being in that person's body, knowing exactly what he feels. But you're right. There's a lot of people asking the question, why isn't he playing through the discomfort of the PCL sprain? And look, the larger question, Mike, to me, and again, look, whether he plays, whether he doesn't play, I think Cincinnati would win this game this weekend, but that's neither here nor there. I think the biggest issue going forward is he'll miss his 6th game of the season this weekend. He missed 5 last year. In addition, he missed 3/4 of a game last year and 3/4 of the game this year because he was hurt early in both games that he was removed from. And so essentially, you're talking about a guy who over the last 2 years has missed 34% playing time for the Baltimore Ravens in that time. So if I'm the Ravens, I'm not talking to him right now about a long-term contract unless there's significant protection in it for the team, which he's not going to want to do, and unless there's less guaranteed money than they originally had thought to offer him, which he's not going to do that either. So to me, the end game is, I believe in March, the Ravens are probably going to franchise him, and they'll see if somebody comes after him.
I want to get to that in a second. Before we close the books on this injury, I'm looking at the penmedicine.org website, maintained and established by the University of Pennsylvania, so I assume it's somewhat credible. The PCL means posterior cruciate ligament. It's in the back of the knee. The anterior cruciate ligament, front of the knee, that's the one that doesn't heal on its own. That's the one that if it goes, you're done for months, maybe longer. That's the ligament that runs through the knee and holds it all together. The PCL gets injured when you hyperextend the knee, and it can, as Peter says, heal on its own, and usually it's injured while there's other trauma to the knee. It's not usual for only the PCL to be injured if you have a PCL injury,
right.
But we are at the point where there is a belief. You just read between the lines of what John Harbaugh says. They think he can play. And Peter, I don't blame the guy for not playing without his long-term financial security. I wouldn't play at less than 100% if I was potentially in the last game of my contract with no commitment beyond this year, with nothing to show financially for the risk I'm about to take. I wouldn't do it either. The problem is, and this gets to the point that you were alluding to, they're in this awkward back and forth that really isn't a back and forth because they aren't communicating about a contract now. And does he deserve to have a second deal? Yes. Does he deserve the deal that he wants? The Ravens think no. That's the problem. The Ravens have been ready to pay him handsomely. The Roquan Smith deal that was negotiated this week by Roquan Smith without an agent proves that the Ravens are indeed capable of doing a fair deal with a player who doesn't have an agent. So that's not why he doesn't have a deal. He doesn't have a deal in part because he doesn't have an agent, but also in part because he's been fixated on getting a 5-year fully guaranteed contract, same as Deshaun Watson, without fully understanding why and how Watson got his contract. And this is where an agent would be valuable, not just to negotiate with the Ravens, Peter, but to say to Lamar Jackson, you want the Deshaun Watson deal, here's what you got to do. Number one, you got to tell the Ravens, I'm never playing for you again. Trade me. Number two, you got to hope they say yes. Okay, we'll trade you. Number three, you got to work the market to get multiple teams to the table who want you and create a sense of competition among them. Number four, you got to dump one of them at the absolute right moment so their reaction is to come back and say, we'll do whatever we can to get you. How about a 5-year fully guaranteed contract? That's how Deshaun Watson got his deal. Lamar Jackson doesn't just walk through the door and get handed a 5-year fully guaranteed contract by his current team. I don't think he understands that, Peter. I wouldn't understand it if I was 25 and I didn't have someone to explain it to me. So that's why we are where we are. They've had this impasse that has existed for months. And now, I don't expect the guy to play without long-term financial security. But the problem is he should have it, because, frankly, he should have taken the best offer that the Ravens were willing to make before the season started, because, by all appearances, it was a fair and appropriate offer. It just wasn't 5 years fully guaranteed.
I think, and again, look, I have no idea. I haven't talked to Lamar Jackson this whole season. I've talked to him several times, many times, actually. And I like him. I think he's a really good person, with excellent intentions and all that, but he just, I think, has a different opinion of what he's worth, and without having an agent involved to try to say to him, listen, Deshaun Watson's contract is an absolute, total, unequivocal outlier. It's not happening for you. And evidently he doesn't have anybody telling him that. And again, Mike, it would be one thing if he was, if he'd played full seasons each of the last 2 years, won a couple of playoff games, and played great and contended for the MVP and all that stuff. There would, I could argue that the Ravens would say, well, we don't want to fully guarantee it, but whatever, we may have to do that. But he's left so many openings for the Ravens to basically say, this is a quarterback who's going to make his living in part with his legs. There aren't many who make it with their arm and their legs. Justin Fields, him, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Daniel Jones. So there aren't that many. But the point is, if you miss 1/3 of your team's snaps in a 2-year period, that team obviously is going to have questions about your long-term health and your ability to lead the team long-term. So this is not anything that should be, the Ravens are screwing them or, whatever. This is just the reality in today's sports of the best part of ability is availability. And, there's absolutely no way they can pay him this offseason what they thought about paying him last offseason.
And that makes it even harder to envision Lamar Jackson sticking around with anything but the franchise tag. And you're right. The Deshaun Watson deal was an outlier. And I don't know how much of the end result was engineered. I think happenstance was a factor. Dealing with a team that may have been inclined to do something that other teams would say is stupid, like fully guaranteeing a 5-year deal. But it all started with Watson being willing 2 years ago to be the villain and say, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm never playing for you again. And until Lamar Jackson is ready to send that message to the Ravens, he can't even start the process of working toward the possibility of that deal. Now, that said, Peter, and you alluded to this, franchise tag. All right, let's break this down. Shireen and I yesterday were talking about this. I wrote something at PFT last night, late afternoon, about the options the Ravens now have. And it had seemed for a long time they would just do exclusive franchise tag. No one can talk to him. It's a significant amount of money for 1 year, and you keep him for 2 more years, and then he potentially walks away. But you're paying him a lot this year and a 20% raise over what you pay him in 2023 to keep him for 24. Then it's the Kirk Cousins model, and he walks into free agency. I don't think they're going to do that anymore. And I had gone from thinking exclusive franchise tag to non-exclusive. And what non-exclusive does, it gives him the opportunity to talk to other teams. Now, the other teams would have to be willing, in theory, to give up 2 first-round picks, or, as a more practical matter, negotiate something less than that with the Baltimore Ravens for a trade. That makes those teams willing to pay less when they have to give that up. But, hey, the Browns gave up a lot of stuff and still gave Deshaun Watson a 5-year fully guaranteed contract, so it's not impossible. But that's a way, Peter, non-exclusive franchise tag is a way for Lamar Jackson to go see what's out there, or more importantly, what's not out there. Hey, you want to go get a 5-year fully guaranteed deal? We're using the non-exclusive franchise tag. Vaya con Dios. Go talk to whoever, and you can sign an offer sheet. And you know what? Maybe we'll match it. Maybe we'll see the light, or maybe we won't, and we'll take the 2 first-round picks and move on. But I think at most now what you're going to see from the Ravens in the offseason, Peter, is a non-exclusive franchise tag, with Jackson having the chance to go look elsewhere for that thing that he's never going to get from the Ravens.
Mike, you talk about, maybe negotiating with another team. Now, you heard Woody Johnson of the Jets talk yesterday that basically money's not going to be an object going for a quarterback. The question is, would the New York Jets, let's just say, give the 13th pick in the draft this year and something substantial in 2024, whether it be a 1 or a 2, to bring Lamar Jackson on, to sign him to a huge contract, a risky huge contract? Would the Washington Commanders be willing to do the same thing? Would Washington be willing to trade the 16th pick this year and something significant next year? Or, in Washington's case, would they be willing to trade the first pick this year and one of their great defensive front players for Lamar Jackson? So I think that it's possible that this could happen. And I agree with you. I think the more likely thing is non-exclusive for a very simple reason. I think the Ravens would like to see what's out there, because then let's just say, for the sake of argument, that no one makes an offer. I'm sure that those close to Lamar and or the NFLPA will cry collusion in that case. And maybe there will be collusion. I don't know. But I do think that part of doing the non-exclusive tag is throwing your line into the water with a piece of bait on it and seeing if anybody bites. Because if nobody bites, that's going to help you a lot in trying to get Lamar Jackson signed long-term with protection for the team.
And this is a fishing excursion, to continue your metaphor, with two polls. The first one is, will a team bite as it relates to what it would take to make the Ravens happy? The second poll, Peter, is, will a team give Lamar what he wants? And how will he even go about negotiating it if he can't get a deal done with the Ravens? And if we assume that the Roquan Smith deal is persuasive evidence of the ability of the Ravens to fairly negotiate a deal with an unrepresented player, and it shows they're capable of doing it, the question is Lamar capable of getting a team to give him what he wants, whether it's 5 years fully guaranteed or something else that's better than whatever the Ravens were willing to offer back in August? And you touched on something earlier too, Peter, that I think is very important, and I think makes it harder for the Ravens and Jackson to get a deal done after the season. I think what the Ravens had on the table in August, whatever it may have been, and there was some reporting, and not all of it was 100% accurate before the season about what the Ravens had offered. Whatever it was, I don't think it's going to be there after the 2022 season. And I don't think Lamar is going to be happy about that, because Lamar is going to think, hey, if you were willing to pay it to me 4 months ago, why won't you pay it to me now? Well, circumstances have changed. That complicates things as well.
You know, it's inarguable. I have no idea. I mean, if Lamar thinks that, he's not living in the real world. And Mike, look, I do think, I've really thought a lot about this in the last few days, especially since it now becomes apparent that he'll miss his sixth straight game, when originally it was thought he'd miss 2 or 3. I think I've really started to think more seriously about the fact that on opening day 2024, the Ravens are going to have a different quarterback. Now, what I think is going to be interesting to see this year is, would the Ravens, in a quarterback-rich draft, would the Ravens dare, with whatever they're going to pick, 20, 21, 22, I don't know, or maybe significantly lower, would they take a quarterback, just to backstop themselves and for insurance? I doubt they would, but I won't be shocked if they do, either in the first or second round.
I've got 2 other possibilities that the Ravens could pursue, and I'll be as concise as I possibly can, which sometimes means not very. It occurred to me yesterday when talking this through with Shireen. One thing they could do is just throw their hands in the air. Just accept the fact we got 5 great years from Lamar Jackson, 32nd pick in the draft, right, MVP in 2019. Sure, we never went to a Super Bowl, but sometimes it just ends. And sometimes it ends because the guy doesn't play as well as he used to. Sometimes it ends, rarely, but sometimes it ends because we just can't get on the same page. We can't even get in the same room. We can't even get in the same zip code about what he's worth on a long-term deal. So we're just going to let him become a free agent. We're not going to restrict his ability to go to the market and see what's out there, because we believe no one's giving him the deal that he wants. And maybe after he finds out he's not getting that deal elsewhere, he comes back to us and we lay the foundation for a long-term future. I don't think the Ravens would take that risk, which led me to the final option that we identified yesterday after talking it through, Peter, something that doesn't get used very often but is available to the Ravens. Transition tag. Right to match and nothing else. Lamar, we can't negotiate a deal with you. Go negotiate a deal with another team, and we'll have 5 days to decide whether or not to match it. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But we give up. We give up. We can't negotiate a long-term deal with you. If you can go negotiate the deal you want with someone else, then maybe we'll match it. To me, that may be the best option. Again, it's risky. There's a chance he's walking away and you're not getting any compensation other than whatever compensatory draft pick you'd be eligible for in 2024. But if they really are at the end of their rope with this, that would be a not bad option because it's a lower one-year salary. If he doesn't find a long-term deal elsewhere, you keep him around, and it's an opportunity. Now, would somebody else out there want to do the Ravens' work for them? Would they craft some sort of a deal the Ravens couldn't or wouldn't match? That's part of the risk you take. But, Peter, the more I think about it, it's not a bad option. It's not a bad option. If you're confident that another team is going to have the same difficulties you've had trying to get this guy to understand and accept and appreciate the realities in the market and why a 5-year fully guaranteed contract doesn't work for a player like him who may have his best days behind him as a running quarterback, I think that may be the way for the Ravens to go if they're willing to take that risk that somebody loads up a contract that they can't match.
I'll tell you why I don't like that at all for Baltimore, and that's this reason. Suppose Lamar goes out there and the best offer he gets is, and I'm going to make this up, 5 years, 150 with 120 million guaranteed. Let's just say, okay? Well, then let's say the Ravens match that. And Lamar Jackson has to go back to Baltimore with his tail between his legs with a lousy contract, say $80 million less than he could have gotten 6 months ago. And Lamar Jackson is feeling, I got totally jobbed. I got used. This is not at all what I wanted. And I don't want to play for the Ravens anymore. You're basically forcing him to play for the next 5 years at a level of pay that he thinks it borders on insulting. So that's why I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. I would much rather pay him, guarantee him basically a franchise number and in essence, basically say to him, look, this is a non-exclusive franchise tag. So you go out and do the best that you can do. We'll decide whether we want to match, and if we don't match, we'll take the 2-1s or whatever the negotiated settlement is. I just think that makes the most sense to me anyway.
And Peter, you mentioned something earlier that's important for us to highlight and underscore: collusion. There's already a collusion grievance that's been filed by the NFL Players Association against the NFL over this concept of not giving players, veteran players, fully guaranteed contracts. Now, every first-round draft pick at this point, it's evolved to the point where all 32 of them get 4-year fully guaranteed deals. It's veteran deals that aren't typically fully guaranteed beyond 2 years. Sometimes it goes into a third year. Sometimes all of a third year is fully guaranteed. And every once in a while, like Deshaun Watson, all 5 years. The NFLPA has suggested that the teams are coordinating, that it's not happening coincidentally, that it's happening as a result of coordination and collusion. The teams are refusing to do it. That hovers over all of this as well. If there is an opportunity for Lamar Jackson to negotiate with other teams, Peter, the union, as you pointed out, will be watching very carefully. So if it is non-exclusive franchise tag, if it is transition tag, if it's just nothing, go try to find the deal that you can't find here. The negotiations, the offers, the lack thereof, that's something that I think the union will watch very carefully for any evidence of collusion. But the thing about collusion, if the people involved in the process are smart, you're never going to find evidence of it, even if it's happening. They're not going to text, hey, we should all refuse to offer Lamar Jackson a 5-year fully guaranteed deal. A lot of it's implied, and when it's time to piece a case together, you're never going to find a smoking gun, Peter.
Yeah, and look, again, we don't know what's going to happen. we will know sometime in the next 2 months. But I think this is just going to be one of those very well covered stories. And everybody will be trying to sort of ferret out if there is interest in, let's say, Carolina or the Jets or Washington or someplace else that we're not even thinking of. Some team that might be in love with Lamar Jackson and be willing to stretch a little bit. Now, Mike, especially with the cap going up in the coming years, I think it'd be pretty easy to build a contract and backload it. And even if injuries really continue to derail his career, it's not going to ruin your franchise. Obviously, it will hamstring your franchise. But, I've heard probably the same thing that you have, that the cap is going to start to go up appreciably in 24, 25, 26, not necessarily in 23, and maybe not so much in 24, actually, but beyond that. And so if you are going to do a 5-year, say, offer sheet to Lamar Jackson, covering the 23 through 27 seasons, then I think it'd be pretty easy to make a lot of that money, go into 25, 26, and 27 when you're going to be able to afford it more on the cap. So, we'll see. I don't think it's impossible, but this really is going to come with a buyer beware tag on Lamar Jackson because of his injury history the last 2 years.
And that cap will be going up in large part because the losses from the pandemic were smoothed out over multiple years. Once that money has all been replenished, that's when the new TV deals, the gambling money, everything is going to cause the salary cap to skyrocket by the end of the decade. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.